On December 11, 1941, 4 days after Japanese carrier planes turned Pearl Harbor into an inferno, Adolf Hitler walked to the podium of the Reichstag in Berlin. He was about to commit the most catastrophic mistake of his military career. In a speech dripping with contempt for Franklin Roosevelt and American Jewish plutocracy, Hitler announced that Germany was now at war with the United States. The deputies leapt to their feet in thunderous applause. Few of them understood that they had just applauded the beginning of the end for the Third Reich. Why did Hitler do it? Germany was not obligated to follow Japan into war against America. The Tripartite Pact of September 1940 was defensive in nature. Article 3 explicitly stated that if one signatory was attacked, the others were required to assist. Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor. No one had attacked Japan. Legally, Hitler was free to remain neutral toward the United States. He chose war anyway. To understand this decision, we must return to the fateful autumn of 1941. By September, Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, had stalled outside Moscow. German soldiers were dying in blizzards they were never equipped to fight. Hitler needed a decisive victory before winter hardened, and he believed the Soviet Union was on the verge of collapse. Every week, German intelligence reported massive Red Army losses. Hitler convinced himself that one more push would shatter Stalin's empire. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States was already a belligerent in all but name. American destroyers escorted British convoys. The U.S. Navy depth-charged U-boats in the North Atlantic. Roosevelt had pushed the Lend-Lease Act through Congress, turning America into what he openly called the arsenal of democracy. German U-boats were under secret orders to avoid American warships whenever possible. Hitler feared provoking Washington before Germany was ready for a two-ocean war. Pearl Harbor changed everything in an instant. When the first reports reached Berlin on December 7th, German leaders were stunned by the scale of Japan's success. Admiral Raeder's staff celebrated. Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop telephoned the Japanese ambassador to offer congratulations. Hitler was ecstatic. He told his entourage that Japan's entry into the war was a strategic gift from heaven. Now Britain would have to fight on multiple fronts. The Royal Navy would be stretched thin across the Pacific. Most importantly, Japan's attack would keep the United States focused on the Pacific for years. Hitler believed America could not fight a full-scale war against both Japan and Germany at the same time. He was wrong, catastrophically wrong. On December 8th, Roosevelt asked Congress for a declaration of war against Japan. Congress approved in minutes. Germany's ambassador in Washington cabled Berlin that evening. The mood in America was for total war, but only against Japan. There was no mention of Germany. Hitler could have stayed silent. He could have continued the undeclared naval war in the Atlantic while letting Japan absorb the full fury of American industrial power. Instead, he decided to declare war first. Several motives drove this fatal choice. First, Hitler genuinely believed the United States was already at war with Germany. American destroyers had attacked U-boats. The Greer incident, the Kearney, the Reuben James. American warships had been sunk or damaged. In Hitler's mind, Roosevelt wanted war and was only waiting for an excuse. By declaring war openly, Hitler thought he could remove the gloves from his U-boat commanders. No more restrictive rules of engagement. German submarines could now attack American shipping without warning. Hitler expected a ruthless U-boat campaign off the American East Coast would cripple Lend-Lease before the United States could mobilize. He called it Operation Drumbeat. It began in January 1942, and for 6 terrible months, American coastal waters became a shooting gallery. U-boats sank ships within sight of vacationers on Florida beaches, but American shipyards were already outbuilding the submarines 10-1. The second motive was ideological. Hitler despised Franklin Roosevelt with a venom that went beyond politics. He saw the New Deal as Jewish Bolshevik, America as a racial mongrel state dominated by Jewish financiers. In his declaration speech, he ranted about international Jewish finance and Roosevelt's supposed Jewish ancestry. Declaring war on America was, for Hitler, the logical extension of his war against world Jewry. The third motive was strategic arrogance. Hitler believed the Soviet Union would collapse by spring 1942 at the latest. With Russia defeated, he could transfer the entire Wehrmacht westward and finish Britain with a combination of U-boats and the Luftwaffe. America, in his view, would take years to become a serious military factor in Europe. By then, Germany would control the entire continent from the Atlantic to the Urals. He told his generals the United States was a gigantic country with unbelievable resources, but its army was negligible and its people lacked fighting spirit. He dismissed American industry as geared toward refrigerators and automobiles, not tanks and planes. He was blind to the awakening giant. There was one final, often overlooked factor: Japan. Hitler wanted a global alliance against the Soviet Union. He had been begging Japan for months to attack Siberia, to open a second front against Stalin. Japan refused, choosing the southern option, oil in the Dutch East Indies, instead. When Japan struck Pearl Harbor, Hitler feared Tokyo might negotiate a separate peace with the United States if Germany remained neutral. By declaring war, he bound Japan irrevocably to the Axis cause. He hoped this would finally force Japan to attack the Soviet Union from the east. It never happened. Japan and the Soviet Union remained at peace until August 1945. The declaration of war passed through the Reichstag unanimously. No one dared oppose the Führer. In Washington, the German chargé d'affaires delivered the declaration at the State Department. Secretary of State Cordell Hull read the document with barely concealed fury. He told the German diplomat that in 50 years of public service, he had never seen a document so full of lies. Roosevelt went before Congress the same day. His speech was short. He called Hitler the ruthless master of a ruthless, but once again defeated Germany. Congress declared war on Germany within hours. American public opinion, which had been divided about Europe, now united overnight. The isolationist movement collapsed. Factory whistles sounded across the country. The arsenal of democracy shifted into high gear. Hitler's decision removed Roosevelt's last political obstacle. Without the German declaration, Roosevelt would have faced an uphill battle to persuade Congress and the public to fight Germany first. Pearl Harbor guaranteed war with Japan. Hitler guaranteed war with Germany. He handed Roosevelt the one thing the president needed most: a clear, unambiguous enemy in Europe. In the cold calculus of grand strategy, Hitler's declaration ranks among the greatest blunders in military history. It turned a limited Pacific War into a true world war. It ensured that American industrial might would be directed against Germany with total commitment. It guaranteed that the second front in Europe would open long before Germany could defeat the Soviet Union. Albert Speer later wrote that when he heard the news, he felt a cold shiver. He knew, even then, that the war was lost. Admiral Yamamoto's warning about awakening a sleeping giant now applied to Germany as much as Japan. By the spring of 1942, American shipyards were launching Liberty ships faster than U-boats could sink them. By 1943, American bombers were darkening German skies. By 1944, American armies were crossing the Rhine. All because of a decision made in a moment of hubris on December 11, 1941. Hitler declared war on the United States because he believed he was already at war, because he underestimated American power, because he overestimated his own, because ideology blinded him to reality, and because he thought the Reich was invincible. History would prove how wrong he was. The guns of American factories would fire the shots that brought the 1,000-year Reich to its knees in less than 4 more years. Pearl Harbor brought America into the war. Hitler's declaration ensured America would finish it. In Berlin, the decision of December 11 did not emerge from a vacuum. It was the culmination of 2 years of escalating tension between Berlin and Washington. Long before Pearl Harbor, Hitler had come to see the United States as the hidden hand behind all his enemies. In his private conversations, he constantly referred to Roosevelt as that Jew in the White House, and to America as the tool of an international Jewish conspiracy. Mein Kampf had already described the United States as a racially degenerate state doomed to collapse under its own mongrel population. By 1941, these delusions had hardened into policy. Every time an American destroyer fired on a U-boat, every Lend-Lease convoy that reached Britain, every Roosevelt speech about making the world safe for democracy reinforced Hitler's conviction that America was the real enemy. He simply refused to wait for Roosevelt to strike first. Hitler's naval commander, Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, had been pushing for unrestricted submarine warfare against American shipping since the summer of 1941. Raeder argued that the U.S. was already a de facto belligerent and that continuing to spare American vessels was costing Germany the Battle of the Atlantic. Hitler repeatedly overruled him, fearing the political repercussions in Washington. Pearl Harbor removed the last restraint. Now, Hitler believed he could unleash the U-boats without giving Roosevelt the excuse he supposedly craved. The irony is bitter. By declaring war, Hitler handed Roosevelt the perfect excuse on a silver platter. The Tripartite Pact itself played a surprisingly small role in the final decision. Most historians once believed that Hitler felt honor-bound to support Japan. That is a myth. The German text of Article 3 is crystal clear. Assistance was required only if a signatory was attacked, not if it attacked someone else. Japanese Ambassador Hiroshi Oshima in Berlin repeatedly asked Ribbentrop whether Germany would declare war. Ribbentrop dodged the question for days. Only when Hitler personally decided did Germany act. Even then, the Japanese government was informed only hours before the Reichstag speech. Tokyo was relieved, but not because they expected German military help. They simply wanted to ensure that America could not concentrate all its forces in the Pacific. The real Japanese hope was that Germany would keep the Soviet Union occupied in the West, while Japan seized Southeast Asia. Neither Axis partner ever seriously coordinated strategy with the other. The declaration also reflected Hitler's warped understanding of American politics. He believed Roosevelt was a weak leader, propped up by Jewish financiers, and that the American people were isolationist at heart. He thought that by declaring war first, he would force Roosevelt to fight a two-front war against the will of the population. He expected anti-war protests, strikes, perhaps even the collapse of the Roosevelt administration. Instead, the exact opposite happened. The America First Committee dissolved within days. Charles Lindbergh, the most prominent isolationist, publicly supported the war effort. Factory workers volunteered for extra shifts. Young men flooded recruiting stations. Hitler never grasped the psychological effect of Pearl Harbor on the American psyche. The Japanese attack unified the country in a way no European crisis ever could. Hitler's declaration turned that unity into a crusade. Inside the German High Command, almost no one agreed with the decision. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel later testified that the General Staff was horrified. Admiral Raeder welcomed the removal of restrictions on U-boats, but considered war with America a catastrophe. Albert Speer recalled that Army Chief of Staff Franz Halder turned pale when he heard the news. General Alfred Jodl called it the greatest mistake of the war. Yet no one spoke up. The culture of obedience in the Third Reich had long since silenced dissent. Hitler's word was law. The consequences unfolded with terrifying speed. In January 1942, Operation Drumbeat began. 5 Type 9 U-boats sailed for the American coast. They found a target-rich environment beyond their wildest dreams. American cities refused to dim their lights. Merchant ships sailed without convoy. The result was slaughter. In the first 6 months of 1942, German submarines sank more than 3 million tons of shipping, most of it off the United States. Captain Reinhard Hartigan sailed U-123 straight into New York Harbor and torpedoed ships silhouetted against the glow of Times Square. Yet this brief, happy time for the U-boat arm proved illusory. By mid-1942, American shipyards were launching ships faster than Germany could sink them. Convoy systems were introduced. Escort carriers and long-range aircraft closed the Atlantic Gap. The U-boat war turned from triumph to disaster. The American entry also transformed the air war. In 1941, the Luftwaffe still ruled European skies. By 1943, the 8th Air Force was sending 1,000 bombers over Germany at a time. P-51 Mustangs with drop tanks escorted them all the way to Berlin. German cities burned. The American intervention decided the North African campaign. Without Hitler's declaration, Roosevelt would have found it almost impossible to send large forces to fight Rommel in 1942. American public opinion demanded revenge against Japan first. Germany's declaration allowed Operation Torch to proceed unopposed by domestic politics. The first major American offensive in the European theater went ahead because Hitler had made Germany the enemy. In the end, the declaration of war on the United States shortened the war by years. It guaranteed that the full weight of American production would crush the Reich long before Germany could achieve any of its strategic goals. It ensured that the Soviet Union would not fight alone. It turned a European war into a war of continents, and it destroyed any faint hope that the Western Allies and Germany might somehow negotiate a separate peace against the Soviet Union. Stalin himself understood this instantly. When the news reached Moscow, he reportedly smiled for the first time in months. He knew the Red Army would no longer face the Wehrmacht alone. Hitler's greatest gamble became his greatest defeat. On December 11, 1941, in the Kroll Opera House, beneath the massive swastika banners, Adolf Hitler sealed the fate of his empire with a 30-minute speech. He thought he was declaring war on a decadent plutocracy. He was actually signing the death warrant of the Third Reich. 4 years later, American and Soviet soldiers shook hands at the Elbe. Berlin lay in ruins. The 1,000-year Reich had lasted 12 years, and it all traced back to that single, fatal, unnecessary declaration of war.